Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and I am finally going to own up to my promise that we are going to do a watch-along of the Event 201 exercise. And why are we going to do this? Well, the same bureaucrats, the same unelected officials, the same representatives of world bodies that are now essentially telling us how to handle this situation, okay? And remember, at this point, everything is scripted anyway. All the decisions have been made. Well, they did do a scripted run of something extremely similar. And I've seen the highlights and I've seen bits and pieces, but I have not watched them top to bottom, each segment. So right now what we're going to do, we're going to watch them. And obviously, I'm going to be jumping in all sorts. So I'm sorry if you're annoyed by me jumping in here, but I'm going to be jumping in. I need you to thumbs this video up. I need you to let people know about this event, because when you have something that's put on by Davos, a.k.a. the World Economic Forum, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Johns Hopkins University, with all of these talking heads that you're now seeing from the WHO and the CDC, etc., and you have a snake-like predator class system with a true deep state as its minions, this stuff needs to be exposed, because I don't think that this has to do with any one nation state. You know, if you watched my watch along with Shade the Motion Picture, I think it's that class of people that pulled this off. So, and we're in the first stages of it when we talk about being pulled off. So without further ado, let's watch Event 201 together.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anita Cicero, Deputy Director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, and today I will be your Master of Ceremonies for Event 201. On behalf of our center and our partners, the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to
so warm to those people.
To our audience here in New York, as well as our larger virtual audience participating online today.
And that's the other thing. You know, there were like global participants. You know, this was like a live streaming event, all in October of earlier this year. Pretty startling.
The goal of the Event 201 exercise is to illustrate the potential consequences of a pandemic and the kinds of societal and economic challenges it would pose. The scenario also highlights the very critical role that global business and public-private partnerships play in preparing for and responding to pandemics.
So right there, again, none of these people are elected. And Trump, he may still be on it, but right now the task force was doing not only question and answers, but, you know, basically, again, preparing the public. There'll be another announcement tomorrow, don't worry. But what's he talking about? Working with these business people. All right, stock market's over El Crasho. Anyone who's telling you it's not El Crasho is lying to you. So again, the economic impact was one of the first things I focused on. It's one of the first things they focus on.
Today's scenario is going to simulate meetings of a multi-stakeholder group called the Pandemic Emergency Board. This board has been urgently convened by the World Economic Forum, and Johns Hopkins has been asked to moderate the board meetings and provide expertise during the board's deliberations. The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic.
Just so weird. Just so odd that this happened. Again, Event 201, this is pre-coronavirus, pre-pandemic, and now they're acclimating you to the fact that the World Economic Forum is going to have a panel of people that will decide what happens if and when something like this takes off.
The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society. The board's recommendations are aimed at top decision makers in national governments, global business, and international organizations.
Let me tell you what all three of those things combined equal. Fascism. That's called fascism.
In this scenario, Tom Inglesby, the director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, will be chairing the board and serving as the moderator for its discussions. Today's exercise will simulate 4 meetings of the Pandemic Emergency Board, and each meeting will be devoted to one key topic. Each meeting will start with a video and a briefing that will provide the information needed for the board members to engage. Please note, this is not a test of any particular person, organization, or nation. The participants are all playing as themselves.
I think that's key. Why? Because right now, what are the kind of the headlines back and forth? This was released by a nation state, or it originated in a nation state. We don't know either of those things. I'm not saying that nation states don't have bioweapons labs. They obviously do. But when China and Iran come out and say it's an American bioweapon, and then Pompeo and Trump say it's the Chinese virus, you're only going to have battles when, in fact, there's a consortium out there of a predator class that is unelected that at the end of the day will benefit from this and pick the pieces up to restructure society.
That is senior business executives, NGO leaders, and government officials. They're not expected to be pandemic experts. We've really asked them to participate based on their own expertise and their best professional judgment. With the exception of Tom Inglesby, none of the participants know any of the details about how the exercise will unfold. The Event 201 scenario is fictional, but it's based on public health principles, epidemiologic modeling, and assessment of past outbreaks. In other words, we've created a pandemic that could realistically occur.
We've created a pandemic that could realistically occur.
And for those interested in our assumptions, we will have a lot of the background research of the scenario publicly available on our Event 201 website at the conclusion of the exercise. The policy discussions, the challenges to be discussed in this exercise represent controversial, high-stakes issues that would require high-level input from business and government leaders. So just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. For our in-person audience, please do silence all your electronic devices.
Oh, yada, yada, yada.
But you may tweet at #Event201.
Let's live tweet it and think about that. Why don't you go back to some of those live tweets after this? Right. I think this is October 19th. Okay, #Event201. You can search that over in Twitter and see what is, show your friends little pieces.
We're going to have a 15-minute break in the middle of the exercise, so please try to confine your calls and work to that time. Because the event is being video recorded and live streamed, we ask that you remain quiet as much as possible and avoid moving around during the exercise. The exercise is going to end at 12:30, and there'll be a luncheon in the cotillion room.
Oh, the cotillion room! Isn't it nice? The cotillion room. Little minions of the predator class, they get to go to the cotillion room and decide the fates of us normies, of the serf class. There's a lot of us.
As you know, there's also an online virtual Event 201 exercise that's happening simultaneously. And for those of you online, and I understand there are hundreds of you, you will be seeing the same news videos and briefings as we do here in New York. But you will engage in your own online discussion in place of watching the discussions of the players here in the room. The topics and the pacing of the deliberations will be the same, both online and in the room. So, as you can see on this slide, we have an outstanding group of global leaders playing the role of the Pandemic Emergency Board members here in New York.
They're outstanding. No one elected them to anything. No one said they should get to decide any of this stuff. But hey.
And with that, let's welcome our participants and invite them into the room. Tom Inglesby from Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security.
And remember, that's the guy that knows how this whole thing plays out. He's kind of like He's the in-the-know guy that's kind of going to puppeteer every other little aristocrat and minion of the predator class, in some cases, member of the predator class here.
Toya Abbott, Marriott International. Sophia Borges, UN Foundation.
So before we talk about the UN Foundation, I have to say with Marriott International, remember right now they're going to retrofit a bunch of hotels as hospitals for this thing.
Brad Connett, Henry Schein. Chris Elias, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Tim Evans, formerly of the World Bank. George Gao from China CDC. Avril Haines, former Deputy U.S. National Security Advisor. Jane Hulton, ANZ Bank, and former secretaries of both the Department of Health and Finance in Australia. Matthew Harrington from Edelman. Martin Knuckle from Lufthansa Group. Eduardo Martinez, UPS Foundation. Stephen Redd from US CDC. Adrian Thomas from Johnson & Johnson. And Hasti Taggi from NBC Universal Media. And Lavin Theroux from the Monetary Authority of Singapore.
Now, I want to point out the global nature of this, but then I also want to point out the media propaganda nature of this. You know, when you talk about, NBC, I mean, you're talking about as establishment and puppeteered as it gets. Lynette says, pay special attention what George Gao when he speaks. Major predictive programming. Interesting, Lynette. Well, he'll get to speak. They all will.
Welcome. And before we begin the exercise, I also want to introduce Ryan Morehard, who's lead of the Global Health Security Group at the World Economic Forum, and he will say a few words. Ryan.
Thank you, Anita. And good morning and welcome again on behalf of the Center for Health Security, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the World Economic Forum. Welcome to Event 201. 201. Throughout our session today, I hope that number will represent two dimensions of our work to strengthen global health security. First, today, there are 200 epidemic events every year, and it hasn't always been this way. The number is increasing, driven by globalization, climate change, urbanization, deforestation, and other trends of our modern world. In other words, we're in a new era of epidemic risk.
Let me just tell you right now why that's a lie, all right? First of all, to slip climate change in there, as if that has any fucking bearing whatsoever, is comical. Now, let's just take a look at something like Lyme disease in the United States. Pretty weird that now they're acknowledging that Lyme disease may have originated on Plum Island or in a lab, and that's a bioweapon. So when we talk about the true epidemics of the world, why are we not talking about strategically placed bioweapons once here? I'll tell you why. Because these are minion mouthpieces of the Muppet predator class. I mean, they literally might as well have a hand up this guy's anus and bop, 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 say what we want you to say, bop, 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 unprecedented fear, 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 fear. And 201, it's going to tip the scales. That last one, it's going to get us all. And now we're in the situation. And unfortunately, a lot of people want to be at the behest of some, little minion like this. No, thank you.
And the second dimension is that one of these days, one of these epidemic events will be a pandemic.
Here we are.
A fast-moving pandemic. And mitigating risk and impact of that pandemic will require an all-hands-on-deck approach. And we know from past responses that public-private cooperation will be essential.
Again, fascism.
We also know from these responses that there are some bright spots when it comes to public-private cooperation, but some real critical challenges remain. But there's every reason for us to work together to address these challenges. For one, it turns out that at $570 billion annualized, the annualized risk posed by pandemics is on par and rivals with climate change.
Again, notice how they keep invoking climate change. And here they're invoking the economy, but the economy is different. And optimistically, whatever, they want me to curse. I'm going to try not to curse because I want more and more people to see this. Yeah, I'm going to try to keep it down. Look, if you haven't noticed, guys, I feel like my last few videos have been very measured, and they should be very measured because I need people to take this very seriously. All right? Again, when you have an elitist predator class laying something like this out for you and telling you who's going to make the decisions, that should be known to the general public. They should know right now, you know, what is rolling out is already been decided. They're treating you like children with a slow bleed out of the economy. It's that slow rollout. 1929 meets 1984 meets 9/11.
Which means that the pandemic risk to lives and livelihoods is at a level that governments and the world's biggest businesses can no longer afford to ignore.
Fascism.
And we are counting on this conversation today to inform our work together to improve our collective preparedness and to protect lives and livelihoods from pandemics.
Sure you are.
And to provide further context, I'm very pleased to introduce a short video now from Dr. Mike Ryan, the Executive Director at WHO and the head of WHO's emergency program.
Now this guy's going to be pretty familiar to you because before the pandemic was in the United States, he was one of the people that you were seeing on the television a lot. And by the way, this guy is somebody that said the death rate might be as high as 10%. All right?
That will turn to a video.
Greetings, distinguished guests, and thank you for this opportunity to say a few words at this year's event 201, the high-level simulation exercise for pandemic preparedness and response, hosted by Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, the World Economic Forum, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Once you notice the groveling every single time? Boy, it's so good that the World Economic Forum, huh? And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, huh? And Johns Hopkins got together to do this. They're the best. We love Bill and Melinda Gates.
Unfortunately, I was not able to join you today. I'm involved in the IHR Emergency Committee for Ebola, but I had hoped to be in the room with you because the issues you will be dealing with over the next hours may be tabletop exercises today, but they address real and critical threats which we at WHO take very seriously.
Maybe tabletop exercises today. By the way, Pompeo used the term exercise yesterday, and you could see Trump mumble in the back, well, you should have told us. Now, listen, Trump got bamboozled by this as much as anybody else because, again, he's just another puppet. He's been another puppet. Every time he gets out of line, just like in Syria, you know, they flip the script on him. You know, the guy, unfortunately, he may have a good heart. He doesn't have the execution. Anybody in fantasy land thinking this is a deep state takedown? I mean, does this look like they planned for a deep state takedown here? Does it look like the people up there are going to jail, or are they actually deciding what's going on? And remember, it may be an exercise today, but it could be real world tomorrow. Turned real world pretty quick.
Without a question, epidemic risk has become a global strategic concern. I don't think we've ever been in a situation where we have had to respond to so many health emergencies at once. This is a new normal. I don't expect the frequency of these epidemics to reduce, and in fact, vulnerabilities all over the world, developed and developing countries, have increased, not decreased, driven by many, many factors, mainly through human behaviour, economic development, population density, and many others. The scenario you will be presented with this morning could easily become one a shared reality one day. I fully expect that we will be confronted by a fast-moving, highly lethal pandemic of a respiratory pathogen. The question is, are we prepared to globally respond to the next major pandemic event? Are we ready to cooperate and perform across countries and across sectors to face such a threat? Have we established the surveillance and risk assessment systems, the communication tools, the supply chains, and the business continuity plans that will be needed, not only to protect health in a major epidemic or pandemic, but to protect economic development, to protect political and social systems.
There it is right there. To protect economic development and social and political systems. That's what this is really about. Protecting the predator class above all else. And managing the people. No matter what you believe about what's going on and the severity of the disease, all these mechanisms have been turning and turning and turning and turning. And I mean, could he have laid it out more? I mean, talk about globalization. Talk about one world government. Talk about a new world order. I don't know.
Do we collectively drive innovation enough to face the evolving global threats which we are anticipating? The nature of pandemics is that many countries will be affected at the same time. This is particularly true with the respiratory pathogen, as they are often transmitted by asymptomatic persons.
Asymptomatic persons. And by the way, you notice he's reading off a script here. You know, this isn't something, it comes off the cuff. No, this is all scripted, man. Just like the majority of what you're seeing out there is now scripted.
They spread fast. In 2009, the pandemic virus reached all continents in less than 9 weeks. WHO's priorities are to establish a minimum capacity to detect and respond in each country around the world, to develop global strategies for the containment and control of individual disease threats, and develop global mechanisms to ensure cross-sectoral and multinational, multilateral coordination. Innovation and partnership across all sectors are needed, including joint strategies between global health leaders and the drivers of travel, communication, data technology industries. WHO is working at all levels through a variety of partnerships to strengthen national and regional preparedness, such as GORN, the Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network. Through the PIP framework adopted by WHO member states in 2011, WHO has secured 400 million vaccine doses for influenza, 10 million antiviral treatments, and 250,000 diagnostic kits for the next pandemic.
So let's talk about that for a second. Now, vaccines even being pushed at the press conference that just came up with the task force. I'm not interested in one of those. Now, the other thing is chloroquine. Now, they're saying that could be, 100% good, but at the same time, you look at the side effects, not the best. Maybe not something I want to try either. You see the papers on vitamin C, for instance. That's a possibility too. I don't think that we have the data from first world nations yet that's going to let us know what's really going on. And now the hysteria and the panic in New York is over the top because what? They see the military on the streets all of a sudden. And they feel the doors closing in. And Cuomo's telling you, don't believe the rumors, but there's not enough beds, and there's not enough ventilators, and there's not enough masks, and there may not be enough health personnel. In fact, I got a phone call. I can't say from who, but they got a confidential thing, email at 7 a.m., where they're already trying to recruit health professionals from upstate New York to relocate down by the city. I mean, this is all real, guys. But what you're watching here is the scripted preparation in October 2019 by the same people who are telling you what to do now.
We have completed external evaluations of surveillance and response systems in over 100 countries and carried out more than 50 simulation exercises at country level, looking for vulnerabilities and weaknesses in national systems. This voluntary, collaborative, multi-sectoral process helps countries to assess their capacities and identifies the most critical gaps within their health systems in order to prioritise opportunities for enhanced preparedness and response. The Pandemic Supply Chain Network, part of the Epidemic Readiness Accelerator, which is a project of the World Economic Forum in partnership with many, including WHO. It's a public-private collaboration to develop a globally connected supply chain that can support health emergency operations during a pandemic. Stakeholders consist of product manufacturers to logistics providers, distributors and UN partners, including ourselves. Michael Griffin is WHO's focal point for the Pandemic Supply Chain Network, and he's there with you this week. Constant innovation and the use of cutting-edge technology is key to pandemic preparedness. In order to pool data and analytics at a global scale for disease prevention, the EpiBrain initiative, a global data ecosystem, aims to build a collaboration of big data networks to understand and predict epidemics.
Stop. Big data networks. One of the outcomes of this could be that social credit score that's already kind of in place in China being more globally adopted. The meritocracy, if you will. I want people to really understand that, because I think that people need to get it. That what? This could be an event to usher in what? A globalized currency of some sort. A fully digital track, trace, database, everything you do type of system that I've been warning about forever. And think about the big data networks that they're talking about right here. And again, this guy is the same guy that's telling you what to do now.
Supports data science, innovation for outbreak preparedness and response. Despite this progress, there is still much to be done. Cross-sectoral simulation exercises, such as the one you will be experiencing today, contribute to a better understanding of the critical gaps, the cooperation required from global businesses, response decisions required from government and public health leaders to minimise large-scale economic and societal consequences of a severe pandemic. I wish you the best of luck, and we are looking forward to working with each of you to strengthen pandemic preparedness in the future. Thank you.
And our thanks to Dr. Ryan. And with that, here in New York and online, welcome to Event 201.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus.
So let's just stop. Yes, I didn't want to give it away. I haven't talked about this aspect before, but of course I've seen the highlights and I've seen parts like this. Yes, they predicted a coronavirus would come out in October 2019 and be the pandemic. Now, sure, they used the kind of swine flu type thing that they've propagated before. This isn't going to be 100% the same script. There's definitely variations of it, but there it is. The coronavirus. How about that? How about that? An outbreak of a coronavirus. Just kooky. Who knew? Thumbs this video up, subscribe, and share, guys.
Spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died.
So once again, it's just so odd that this is a flu-like virus showing the same symptoms that we're seeing right now described. And it's not coronavirus, it's COVID-19. It's novel coronavirus. What do you mean, Jason? This isn't suspicious at all. I mean, come on.
At first, the spread was limited to those with close contacts, healthcare personnel, co-workers, and families. But now it's spreading rapidly throughout local communities.
Already been done.
International travel has turned local epidemics into a pandemic spanning the globe. Just 3 months ago, CAP started in South America, but has now reached several countries with more than 30,000 cases and nearly 2,000 deaths.
And we're well beyond all of that, by the way. So you can say what you want about, the placement here, but already in those months, we're well beyond that in 3 months, okay? So just once again, check it out. Flu-like symptoms, pneumonia, deaths, coronavirus, WHO, bunch of unelected bureaucrats about to tell you what's what and how to manage this thing.
Good morning, and thank you all for being part of this Pandemic Emergency Board. We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
Fascism.
The global community has been working to respond to this pandemic since its recognition But as health and economic impacts have become more severe, the World Economic Forum has convened this board because of your combined expertise, your backgrounds, and your global voice.
Now let's just stop. Let's talk about how globalism has actually made the whole situation worse, yet they're going to tell us, because it's the World Economic Forum that's putting this together, how to solve it. First of all, once this outbreak started in a place like China and the supply chain's broken, the economic repercussions were already there. The markets are so interlocked that they were bound for failure. So what does the predator class do? They got the uninformed 401ks and they scoop things up, and so do their minions. That's why you have so many senators now. You're seeing their insider trading because they knew it was coming, right? But we're supposed to trust these people. We're supposed to trust them.
We will need all of you to help us respond to urgent policy crises that are emerging. The purpose of this board is to advise leaders in national governments, global business, and international organizations on the response to the pandemic, particularly focused on international problems that require collaboration between business and government. Your recommendations will be critical and will be promulgated and communicated broadly at the end of this meeting. On the left screen, as we have this meeting, you will find a dashboard of information about the pandemic that will help us in our conversations. As important background for this discussion, we want to start the meeting by viewing this news story that just aired on Global News Network.
And you got to love how they put in like the propaganda news pieces, because once again, the mainstream media hasn't been really telling you what Jason Burmis has been telling you, have they? They haven't been playing the parts of the press conferences and the questions that I have they? They've focused on a lot of the sensationalized aspects instead of focusing on what they're telling you and the language they're using, haven't they?
Continuing our coverage of the newly discovered CAPS disease and the scope of its deadly outbreaks, there are now more than 30,000 reported cases. Experts warn this may be just the beginning of a global problem. GNN science reporters have produced a video about what we know so far about CAPS, the virus, the outbreak, and the resulting chaos.
CAPS is a novel coronavirus.
Let's stop. So again, calling it again a novel coronavirus.
Related to those viruses that caused the frightening SARS epidemic in 2003 and the deadly MERS outbreaks in recent years.
And remember, you know, the scientists that have looked at this for some time have published paperwork that it says it's like a combination of SARS and AIDS.
Scientists think each infected person in turn infects on average 2 more people. This disease is proving more transmissible than SARS or MERS and about as contagious as influenza.
And here's the thing, they've already told us that this is way more contagious than the regular influenza. And that's Trump has said that, and Cuomo has said that. That's not Jason Burmis telling you that.
Essentially, the cumulative number of cases is doubling every week. At this rate, we can expect to see 16 times as many cases in a month unless we find a way to interrupt transmission. The virus appears to be spreading rapidly in densely populated and impoverished neighborhoods in some megacities in South America.
Now let me stop this. What they did here, in my opinion, is kind of played on the global racism out there. What people don't understand is, although this is, you know, again, it's highly transmissible, but who's it really attacking? People that don't have the best immune systems, right? Supposedly, or underlying conditions. But then you look at Italy, and that doesn't exactly seem to be the case either. Now, densely populated areas, yeah, New York City is going to be a hotbed for this thing. But without, and remember, there's only been selective testing and still going to be selective testing. Until we realize how many people have been infected and are completely asymptomatic, you're just going to have panic, right? And to me, the idea that somehow the outbreaks would be worse because of impoverishment in South America is absurd. I think in a first world nation like the United States, where there's so much obesity, diabetes, people on certain types of medication, they're going to be the ones that it hits the hardest, unfortunately.
CAPS is a serious respiratory disease. More than half of the recognized cases have required hospital care, creating a huge strain on healthcare systems.
And luckily, we're not there.
The fatality rate is about 10%.
We
For
might be there.
comparison,
I don't know.
CAPS
I don't
is about
think
as
so.
lethal as SARS and 2 to 4 times more lethal than the 1918 influenza pandemic, the worst pandemic on record. Even so, some people only exhibit mild flu-like symptoms, not requiring treatment in a hospital. Alarmingly, those people are able to walk around and spread the virus, not realizing they are doing so.
Sound familiar? Or all the asymptomatic people.
Even worse, international travelers have been arriving at their destinations symptom-free, but within a matter of hours, becoming ill. Travel-related cases have blossomed into outbreaks in a number of locations and have quickly grown faster than health authorities could respond and contain them. In other places, physicians have quickly recognized the symptoms of CAPS and have been able to isolate infected individuals and avoid an outbreak, for now. Global public health experts are very concerned.
I just want to say, we haven't done that. There is no for now, okay? We've done selective testing to underplay the amount infected because of the panic that will ensue, and especially now that the military is in place. I mean, we're talking, guys, it's on. I mean, national lockdown is going to be a real thing. It's a matter of time. It's not an if but when scenario. I wish I was wrong
about this disease. Because it appears the virus is readily transmitted through the air from person to person, essentially all people are susceptible. Experts agree unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
And it certainly looks like we're right there, right? I mean, if we're not there yet, it's just because it hasn't been reported. You've got quarantines even in Moscow. And you can call them whatever you want, self-isolation, containment zones. I can't even keep up. With all the press conferences that are being held in these slow rollout situations.
Models developed by leading public health authorities indicate a CAPS pandemic could lead to an outcome worse than the 1918 influenza, which killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide. Given the global population is 4 times larger than it was in 1918, if these models prove accurate, we could be looking at hundreds of millions of deaths over the next year or two.
And remember, right now with this COVID-19, the goalpost just keeps moving. Am I wrong? 2 to 3 weeks isolation, 2 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, could last 18 months.
Okay, now we're going to get a briefing on the numbers and distribution of cases by Dr. Caitlin Rivers.
As you've just heard, the outbreak is very worrisome. The vast majority of cases are occurring in Brazil and other South American countries. However, as you can see on the screen, there have been some spread to Portugal, the continental United States, and mainland China. Our models project that with continued spread in Latin America and predicted spread to additional countries, we could be looking at double the number of cases in 1 week and 16 times as many in a month if we are not able to stop the spread.
And let's just stop that there. So basically using the same language, they've said the doubling, the spread, it's all there. It's all there. It's just a different place.
That would be on the order of 500,000 cases, and it would continue to rise exponentially. In 3 months, we could be approaching 10 million cases. We are also tracking financial markets as an indicator of the economic impacts of CAPS.
And let's stop this. Remember, why should we believe any of the nation states' numbers? Why should we believe the numbers put out by Johns Hopkins? All of those are based on official government numbers. If you don't trust this government or another nation state's government or China's government, how can we ever trust the numbers that are put out? Again, South Korea seemed to do the most extensive work, at least on paper, proving their point, saying a 0.6% fatality rate after infection. testing large swaths of the population, including those who would be asymptomatic. I think that was essential, and no one else has followed that model. Now, apparently Germany's doing all right. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but what you're seeing here is planned programming, again, by a bunch of minions of the predator class, the rulers of the technopoly, if you will, about to make big decisions about your life and my life.
While markets are down worldwide in the past couple of weeks, they are still positive for the year.
Thank you, Dr. Rivers. The first emerging policy crisis for which we need this board's recommendations regards global allocation and distribution of medical countermeasures. And by medical countermeasures, we mean vaccines, drugs, and diagnostics and other medical supplies to help us combat the CAPS pandemic. I know we would all agree that if we had a vaccine in hand for CAPS, it'd be a game changer.
I mean, pushing that vaccine out of the gates. Forget about therapeutics, forget about a treatment. Vaccine, vaccine, vaccine.
But leading vaccine experts say a vaccine in the near term is highly unlikely. But there is an antiviral that does look like it will work.
Now, another thing with the antivirals and, the chloroquine that they're talking about, remember Dr. David Ho, the man that cured HIV or AIDS for rich people back in 1996. You can go check him out. He was Time Man of the Year with a thing called protease inhibitors, a cocktail of drugs. Those are antivirals. But you got to watch out, because if you didn't have money back in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and you had those conditions, they gave you the drugs that just killed you.
And to understand that better, we're going to watch one more clip here.
Continuing our CAPS disease coverage and possible solutions, I'm joined by immunologist Dr. Yvonne Bello and Dr. Rhea Blakey, an epidemiologist, both highly respected in their fields. Let's get right to it. Why are people saying a vaccine for the CAPS virus is not likely in the near term?
And let me just tell you the strategy on this, too. They're going to make you clamor for the vaccine. But anybody who knows anything about influenza and the flu, for instance, knows that vaccines don't really work about it. I know you get the shot. There's so many different strains. Now, they've already said there's 2 different strains of COVID-19, which makes me suspicious in the first place. Did it mutate? Were there 2 different strains? Why are we talking about 2 different strains of this thing? But again, what has the media push been like? It's been just like this. No vaccine in the near future. And then you also have, Israel that says they're going to have a vaccine. You see the test runs already beginning, hyping you up for demanding that not only you and your family get the vaccine, but your neighbors take it, even if they don't want it.
Researchers are working on a vaccine, and we have viable leads, but it's complicated. We have known about CAPS-like viruses in animals and people for decades, but have not been successful at developing a licensed vaccine. And sure, there are new technologies that may help, but it's going to be difficult. I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic. Even if we discover a good vaccine candidate, we're starting from scratch, and it takes time to test safety and efficacy, typically years. So even if testing moves quickly, global manufacturing will still need to be established. Again, multiple hurdles.
We simply cannot rely on these old timelines and processes. This is a crisis. We have to move beyond these issues.
What are they telling you? We have to move beyond these issues. This means quick testing, if any, experimental vaccines. We're not going to be held liable from what happens, and we may force it upon you. I mean, preparing you right now for medical martial law.
It may be complicated, difficult, but if we dedicate all available resources, this can happen. Also, keep in mind, we need effective treatments sooner rather than later. Extranavir is an antiviral drug. Scientists have told me this could be effective. We need to start treating people immediately.
While I agree Extranavir does look promising, it's currently used for treating HIV. However, it's not manufactured on the scale needed for treating this many people.
So let's stop. There's not enough. There's always this scarcity of these drugs. Why is that? Because again, Big Pharma wants to control you. And you notice how we were talking about antivirals, HIV. I already mentioned Dr. David Ho and this pandemic and how he's working on that. When they're talking about the what is it? The hydrochloroquine, that, is a drug they use in Africa. And remember, for poor people with HIV and AIDS, AZT, and that'll hurt your immune system, could kill you. Why should we trust anybody in a white jacket talking on behalf of either the CDC or the World Health Organization? I'd rather talk to people on the ground that are seeing the results and that are dealing with this up close and personal, not mouthpieces of the unelected predator class.
And will we just stop using it for HIV treatment? How will we get this drug in the quantities needed? Who decides who has priority for the limited amounts we do have? We both know countries are hoarding Extranavir.
Doctor, in my opinion, you are lost in the details. With enough money and political will, anything is possible. Let's get going on this now.
Thank you both for this extremely important discussion. Our U.S. affiliate has just released polling results on public expectations for a vaccine. A majority of Americans expect a vaccine to be available within 2 months, and 65% of those polled are eager to take the vaccine, even if it's experimental. In related news, a significant demand for personal protective equipment like N95 masks and gloves are...
Again, N95 masks, same gloves. They're already telling you we're going to retrofit buildings. We're going to start producing this stuff. World War II era, Rosie the Riveter, roll up your sleeves, get ready. October 2019, they did this.
On the rise due to the pandemic. However, globally, hospitals are running low. Additionally, other critical medical supplies such as saline and antibiotics are dwindling. Countries and companies are reportedly stockpiling supplies, disrupting healthcare supply chains, causing dangerous shortages in many parts of the world.
See, now they're going to talk about causing dangerous shortages in many parts. But remember, the supply chain was broke in China because they quarantined everybody. And then they moved the Uyghur Muslim slaves into the factories to try to get everything moving again. That's the reality of the situation. That's not something they did in this plandemic, if you will. But on the flip side of that, with China and Iran accusing the United States of making a bioweapon, and the United States saying that patient zero came from China, and it's a Chinese virus, China is threatening that they're not going to give us the materials and the medical supplies that we may need in this. Playing nation states off each other when this isn't about nation states. This is about globalization on the next level.
World.
And finally, for the latest information on what we know about vaccines and this antiviral, here's medical countermeasure expert Matt Watson.
As we've just heard, there is no existing vaccine that appears effective against the newly discovered CAPS virus. Governments, scientists, and companies around the world have become working intensively to develop one, but it's highly unlikely that a vaccine could be developed, tested, manufactured, and distributed in less than a year, and it's likely to take much longer. While there have been efforts to develop vaccines against SARS and MERS coronaviruses, none have been licensed, and given the distinctions in the CAPS virus, vaccines against those diseases would not be effective for CAPS. The antiviral drug Extranavir has demonstrated some efficacy against the CAPS virus. It reduces the severity of illness and saves lives in those who are infected, but does not prevent infection like a vaccine would. Extranavir is a generic drug primarily used to treat HIV. It is manufactured in 5 countries, including the United States and China. Approximately 1 million people take Extranavir every day for HIV. If all of those HIV patients could be switched to other antiretroviral drugs, we could potentially free up enough Extranavir to treat 26 million CAPS patients.
But then what do we do with the people who need the HIV drugs? Well, again, this is a false scarcity, all right? That's what you're seeing here. They're saying we can't. I don't believe that. You shouldn't believe that. All right? If they wanted to mobilize the production of something like this on a mass level, they would have already. Just like they would have mobilized the mass production of the masks already, just like they would have mobilized the mass production of tests. And they would have actually tested people in a way that made sense and not selectively tested. But that's not where we're at. That doesn't move the levers of control, does it?
Assuming further that we could double production over the course of a year by bringing additional manufacturing online, we could eventually have 52 million treatment courses per year, but it will take many months to get there. And there is not likely ever to be enough to keep up with the need as long as the disease continues to spread at this accelerating rate. Experts agree that while many lives will be saved by this antiviral, it is not going to slow the pandemic in the same way a vaccine could if we had one available. However, we do have the potential capacity to save many people. Now the question is, how do we distribute the supplies we have? Existing global supply chains and logistics networks for Extranavir run efficiently under normal conditions, but the pandemic is likely to be very different. We are hearing that one country where Extranavir is produced is planning to block some or all of the export of this medicine to hold on to it for their own people. Tensions are rising between governments and pharmaceutical and medical supply companies about how supplies should be allocated and who gets to make those decisions.
And by the way, folks, don't think that we won't strong-arm people with our military. I mean, think about this. We're already kind of doing it to Iran. We have the sanctions, which are basically acts of war against Iran, so they can't get the fucking, oh, I cursed. Sorry, didn't mean to. They can't get the medical supplies they need. Well, most people in this country don't even think they're human anyway because they've been completely brainwashed. But the truth of the matter is, you are going to see more and more of this type of thing.
International humanitarian organizations are raising serious concerns about access to antivirals for people in low and middle income countries. In addition to antivirals, other medical supplies are not reaching those who need them in many parts of the world. This is especially pronounced in low and middle income countries, which are reporting the highest rates of disease transmission and mortality. In part, this is due to last-minute stockpiling and hoarding by customers, and in part, it is due to cost and logistics issues.
So again, they're always trying to get you to feel bad for protecting your family. You're a hoarder. They're hoarding it, you know, on small levels. Just horrible. Joseph B. says, Dr. Rackle using combo of HCQ and azithromycin H. I hope I didn't butcher that. Thank you for the super chat. Joseph B. Let's continue.
Personal protective equipment, such as N95 respirators, are in critically short supply in some areas. N95 respirators are manufactured by many companies around the world, but there are no reliable estimates of how many are produced or what global production surge capacity is. All we can say is that production capacity covers normal demand, and it is not uncommon to have temporary shortages during severe flu seasons. In a severe pandemic, we can expect the need to increase by a factor of at least 2 to 3. Given these supply issues, there are a number of potential proposals being floated aimed at coordinating and facilitating medical countermeasure allocation and delivery around the world. Politicians, business leaders, scientists, and policymakers are weighing in. Some are suggesting that suppliers and buyers continue to work independently to decide where to send antivirals and medical supplies. Others are suggesting that countries where these products are made should be able to decide where those drugs and supplies go.
And let's just say this, you know, with FEMA activated, with the military activated, that's already been decided. Everything can be nationalized at any time. Guys, we are, 28 minutes and 56 seconds into this. We're about the halfway point of this. We're almost at an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this off. We're going to do this part. Now, there's 5 of these. Not all of them are this long. Look, my feed over here on Twitter is basically everything that's going down right now. Please go check it out if you want to know the latest. If you want to financially support me, here we go. Obviously, I'd love to not only hit the mark, but go over the mark this month, especially with how crazy everything's been. $5, $10, $15, it means the world to me. But, you know, again, all you big donors, you've helped out big. I was able to really get the gear I needed for my family. I think there's a big announcement coming tomorrow. I think we're going to see, you know, national shelter in place, only essential travel. It'll be lightly enforced. And then step by step, we'll see more and more enforcement. I'm going to get back on the rock, Finn, quite a bit. Make sure you're thumbing this video up, subscribing, sharing. Sorry, my throat is a little bit hoarse right now, but you yabber this much and it happens. Guys, it's not about left or right. It's about right and wrong. And things are moving quick. Things are moving real quick. Things are changing. This event 201 may have not been real, but it was real damn convenient, wasn't it? And we haven't even got into the bureaucratic decisions of censoring the internet and fake news and all that stuff. But I can assure you, we're going to be diving deep into Event 201 so everybody can see what this really is. Guys, I love you, and I'll see you on the flip.